I recently had this conversation with a former colleague of mine who's a female, and obviously I'm a big fan of, let's say, Evo Psych, all this kind of literature. Now, the topics that we were discussing were about men and women. What do each want? What do they desire? And what I was telling her as an example is women would like to have a guy who was tall, good looking, in shape, confident, smart, charismatic, wealthy, educated, respected by their peers, you know, able to defend them, etc., etc. And on the other hand, men, then they would like to have a woman that's attractive, young, fertile, kind, submissive, um, not promiscuous, low body count, comes from a good family, two-parent household, respects her father, all of that stuff. Obviously attractive. Um, and then she had a hard time kind of wrapping her head around it, saying, "Well, I don't feel that way." Well, I understand it because women are solipsistic, so they draw whenever you try to have a normal discussion with them about, let's say, the world. It's always they kind of point towards like, "Well, I feel like," or "in my experience," or "my friends." So they men have an easier time of actually extracting a topic of discussion and their own personal experience from each other. But women, very often, they kind of mix in the two and they get intertwined. But then you have the great example of there's world hunger. There's kids in Nigeria who are starving, right? Well, I don't believe that because I've never been hungry. It's like, come on, man, seriously. Anyway, so the discussion we had was concerning like what do men and what do women want, and she was kind of a contrarian in this discussion, and I get it. That's cool. She essentially she was saying like, okay, that's not true because look at all the people who are in relationships or married or whatever, and these men and these women don't fit the stereotype. To which I responded, like, does an average person want to be a millionaire? She was like, what does that got to do with anything? I said, does an average person want to be wealthy, want to be a millionaire? She said, probably. I said, great. Is the average person a millionaire? She was like, no. I said, exactly. Now, the fact that an average person is not a millionaire, does that mean that they would not want to be a millionaire? And the caveat is this: if the average since the average person is not a millionaire but they would like to be, if they could attain that level, how would that have an influence on their life, their behavior, their choices, etc.? So essentially, and this is, if you talk about these topics with, let's say, a couple who are in a relationship, married, or whatever, it is super flammable. It's flammable to an extent that if these people are aware and they're educated, they're chill, you can have the discussion. But if you're not sure about that, you might just get them like super pissed at you. Because when you say that people compromise, men, if you ask them like privately, said, look, Leonardo DiCaprio is pushing, late 40s, close to 50, and his girlfriends are all under 25, like supermodels. If you had the options that Leo has, would you live that way? A vast majority of men would say, yeah. And then if their wife or girlfriend was present, they would never say that. Why? Because you can figure out the reaction yourself. It's the same thing a woman who's married or had in a relationship with a dude, and you ask her, like, okay, if you could, would you be together with Chris Hemsworth, right? Or a dude that looks like Chris Hemsworth, who's a billionaire and charismatic and all of this, all the 9 yards, right? She'd probably be like, well, yeah, if we connect or if I fall in love with him, which is basically womanese saying, I would be very open to getting to know this guy because he's ticking all these boxes. So the probability of when I get into touch with him and I talk to him of me falling in love is sky high. A woman is not likely to immediately say like, yeah, because that sounds shallow. That would make her look bad. But isn't it funny that when it's a question of a dude that's super attractive, who's successful, etc., etc., who's got social status, then women kind of open up their hearts to actually getting to know the guy, to falling in love with a guy. So there's this kind of, you have to be able to translate what they say and what they do because actions speak so loud I can't hear what you're saying. Now, she was pushing back on me with this, and and then she asked me like, what is an ideal woman for me? I was like, okay, let me see, probably early mid 20s, potentially late 20s. You know, low body count, attractive, fit, eats healthy, has good values, comes from a solid two-parent household, respects her father, um, yeah, is articulate, is smart because then those, obviously that cognitive capacity is going to be passed on to the next generation, etc. And then she was pushing back, saying, "Well, aren't those early 20s girls immature? Like, can you have a normal conversation with them?" I said, "Well, yeah, now you're generalizing. I don't know why you're saying that." And she said, why wouldn't you like a woman that's your age or older?" And that coming from a woman that's already been an adult for a while, I don't know if she was pulling my leg or testing me, but saying something like that is, it's like a dude that's in his 30s or 40s who's got their life together. Like, you saying like, why wouldn't you be interested in a woman your age or older, is like, wait a minute, if you're seriously saying that, do you not understand? Have you never inquired what men really want? Don't you understand what men want? Like, that's absurd to me. But hey, it is what it is. So this is something that kind of stuck in this discussion. Now everybody always has to make, well, everybody, 99.99% of the population have to make serious compromises when it comes to their goals, ambitions, priorities, and what they can get on in the real world. When somebody says I deserve something, I always kind of get the ick. I'm like, deserve? Says who? It's like if you drive a car that's worth, on the market, let's say it's worth 20,000 euros, but it's got emotional value for you. You think, well, I bought it for 50, whatever, 5 6 years ago, and I've had so many great trips with it, etc. So I really feel connected, and there's so many memories. So I'm not willing to sell it for 20 because to me it's worth more. Well, that's great. The value of the car is still 20. Well, I don't want to sell it at 20. Okay, well, keep the car. So there's that perception of like there's a market value, and there's competition. There's buyers, sellers, and there's more than you on the market. Sometimes people get really triggered when you say that you're competing with, men are competing with other men to have sexual access to women and relationship access, and vice versa. Women are competing for men. Especially women, they kind of get triggered about that. Well, I'm not competing with anybody. It's like, well, yes, you are. No, if I connect, if I feel it with somebody, then it'll happen. It's like, no. Well, it does. So um, I think the sense of competition is easier to grasp for men because men have to earn their value, their status, etc. Starting from like elementary school, boys are playing soccer. Um, you have to be good at soccer to score a goal and get respect from your peers. So competition per se, I think men are more acclimatized psychologically to it, and we accept that. Um, and a guy goes to the gym, the weights are not lying, right? You can't be delusional. If you're strong, you can lift more, right? If you're weak, you can't. So pretending like, oh, well, I don't have to lift in order to be strong. It's like, no, everybody's going to call you out on that. For women, it may be a little different. Like they can say, I'm beautiful, everybody's beautiful, everybody has got a soulmate. But isn't it funny that those who are attractive, their pool of potential soulmates is like hundredfold compared to those who are less attractive? Now, then the question is, well, I think most women get that. But when you openly have the discussion, they will push back, saying, "Oh no, I'm not competing." It's like, yeah, yes, you are. Yes, you are. And the worst thing is, women who are past their prime, we're talking 30s, 40s, there's kind of a separation between those who really don't want to accept that, dude, you're past your prime. They don't want to accept that. They don't want to admit that, like, God damn, my best days are behind me. And then there's the other part who says, yeah, I get that. That's cool. Sure, I understand that. Um, I think mostly those who've made the wrong decisions during their peak years, those are the ones who've got that's a hard pill to swallow. Those who made smart choices, they're like, yeah, sure, I get that. It's the same thing with guys, but to a lesser extent, because reality is like, it smacks dudes in the face a lot easier. So a dude, let's say, who's 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, who's fat, broke, and just a fucking loser. Telling the dude like, bro, you're a fucking loser. It's a lot easier for him to like be like, yeah, I haven't done the work. Um, but yeah, it's I think guys have an easier time taking that in. And when you talk about these issues with women who are, let's say, around their prime, let's say early mid, even late 20s, who are taking good care of what they look like and have a decent mindset, they don't push back on this because they know like, okay, I'm kind of at the peak. I still got a good shot at building a great life for myself in the future. Um, and they don't really fight back that much. Um, and I've realized like there's if you can extract a certain level of triggers from people, I would say women that are a bit older, these discussions are going to be a lot harder. I've tried and I've noticed that after dozens of discussions like this, with guys as well, if they're a bit blue pill, they yeah they're not gonna like it. They're just kind of thinking like you're rude and sexist and whatever, masochist, all this kind of crap. Um, but it also kind of goes back to if a woman is a feminist, even if she's at her peak or she's like otherwise her life is together, she's pushing back on it because there's that blank slate theory mindset of everybody's equal, everybody is good, everybody's this and that, and you cannot rely on statistics, you cannot do evo psych, you can't do any of that. It's just like, oh, why would you study any of this? And even if you do study, why would you look at the results? Because we're all individuals. And anybody who tries to generalize is wrong. They're whatever. We call them a name and ism. But the reality is we have to generalize. For example, the tallest people on this planet on average are the Dutch, right? Does that mean that every Dutch man and a Dutch woman is taller than every other nationality? Of course not. And the shortest you're probably looking at East Asia, China, Korea, that kind of stuff. But then that's predicting is a lot easier when you know the average Dutchman is, for example, 6'1" tall, something like that, and the average Chinese is like, well, 6'1", 185 centimeters, and the average Chinese man is let's say 166. Yeah, there's almost 20 centimeters in the middle there. So there's a lot of predictive value, and people who are like unwilling for whatever belief system ego invest, they're not willing to accept that. I think that makes their life really hard, because sooner or later the reality is going to smack us in the face, for better or worse. And yeah, so for me realizing all of this, it wasn't easy, But I was kind of running towards a brick wall with my belief system. This was already few years back, and kind of waking up to the reality and kind of studying more psychology, biology, anthropology. That started to kind of light up a bit. Like, okay, there's something wrong. I want to know what is wrong, and when I start getting the answers, I can readjust the mindset. And once you readjust, and you start doing the work from a different perspective, then the results will speak for themselves. And it doesn't come fast. It's not easy, but it is definitely worth it because what's the alternative, really?